And all through February, in the last couple of years here at the Centro Colombo Americano, we have made a big effort to continue celebrating Black History Month. We've been doing lots of activities this year and the previous years. Starting this month, we're starting another program with the embassy, with help with the embassy. There's Laura Cruz from the embassy who's going to help us every month, bringing an officer from the embassy to clarify, help us, give us good interviews. And we're starting it this month with KINDALL HAYES, who's we're happy to interview today in February because it is Black History Month. But before going into Black History Month, KINDALL, welcome. Welcome to CCA Radio. Thank you for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit of who KINDALL is, where you're from, how you got into the diplomatic service, because it's a interesting line of work. Let's say it that way.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me here. And thank you for acknowledging Black History Month. It's a time of the year that I love. Let me first begin by saying that I am Black. I know you all can't see me, so let me make that distinction. But no, my parents were born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and I grew up in Tampa, Florida. So I grew up with a very different reality from my parents because they really grew up in the Deep South. Yeah. And I grew up in Florida, which is basically an extension of Latin America. So I came into the knowledge of the Foreign Service when I got to college because my university is a historically Black university, and we have something called a diplomat in residence. And a diplomat in residence is someone who tells underrepresented populations, people who generally don't come to the Foreign Service, about the diplomatic corps so that they can get interested in a career with the Department of State. And so my first love was languages. I started out studying Spanish for 4 years in high school, 2 years in college. And then I realized that there was this great need for Arabic linguists. And so I started studying Arabic, and I did have a brief stint studying Bangla, which is only for Bangladesh, but that was because my first assignment in the Foreign Service was to Dhaka. Wow. So we spent our first 2 years in South Asia. Now we're in Colombia, and our next assignment is in Iraq.
Okay, and when you say
I am happily married. So yes, my husband is a public diplomacy officer, which is one of the reasons why I love cultural affairs. I love press. I love all of these elements because I spent a lot of time as his spouse, helping him to create some of his programs. So for instance, if he had a WNBA player coming to talk about women's empowerment.
When are we going to do that here?
I don't know. This was sports diplomacy, and it was awesome.
Throwing great ideas. I've always... We've never got them here.
Yeah, we got to get a WNBA player. So that's for Laura to take back to her office. But he would have me do like opening choreography. So we'd do like an opening number, and he'd be like, "KINDALL, take the basketball and like teach the girls a dance." And so he'd have me do the dance. Or I would go to the EMK Center, which was named after Edward M. Kennedy, a senator who did a lot of work in Bangladesh. And I would sing at some of their programs, or I would just he just had me involved. And so I love all the cultural affairs work, and I'm so happy to be here today to share with you a little bit about Black history.
Okay, thank you so much for that intro. That's very interesting life. I find fascinating that married couples can do this. It works for you, and even the State Department makes it work so that you can be at the same time and be together. That's just amazing. Amazing work. So let's get into Black History Month. Because you started saying something that I'm going to go there in a couple of questions of Black colleges and Black universities. But let's start in the South. Because every year we do activities for Black History Month. Lately, I've been getting, it's that time again, but we've already done it. Tell our audience that is not really aware of what it is, why it is so important, because you sat there, you were excited, smiling from ear to ear. I love Black History Month. Why it's important to continue to create that awareness?
I think Black history really tells a story of the development of America as this great democracy, because African American citizens through Black History Month, well, not through Black History Month, but through Black history, were demanding that America live up to its values, to its virtues, to the things that it put in writing at the very founding of the nation, of the country, at its independence from Great Britain. And so you'll see in a lot of the speeches through Black leaders over time, a lot of references to the Declaration of Independence or to the Constitution or to the things that America is so that it represents so strongly in other countries when we're doing this kind of outreach. And so I think that Black history is kind of like, I know African American citizens were protesting or were petitioning to become full citizens of the United States, but in attaining their citizenship, they allowed so many other people to get access. For instance, the Civil Rights Movement is probably one of the most powerful things that people know about African American history. But because of the Civil Rights Movement, our immigration laws were changed forever. And so before the Civil Rights Movement, there were quotas on how many people from different nations could come to the United States as immigrants. And afterwards, they abolished all quotas based on national origin. And so communities like South Asians, places like where I served in Bangladesh and in India, people who were underrepresented in the population are now heavily represented in American culture, life, cuisine, music, theater. And so I think Black history just became this, it inspired so many movements, not only within America and American immigration, but in other parts of the world who were having their own struggles for freedom and for certain rights that they wanted to exercise.
Let me go there. How important is something that started really very American?
Yeah.
Today, 2019, how important it is to take that idea of awareness and heritage, importance of certain heritage to other countries. For example, Colombia. You've been for a while in Colombia. Tell me that idea of Black history is not just something very American. It's not the civil rights, because it was state rights versus federal. It was. How can you translate something like that, awareness, to other countries, other regions?
I think it's about asking for the best that an individual can bring to bear, but also demanding something great of your country. That citizens can get together and that they can demand better governance and better leadership and representation, that they can hold their governments and their elected officials accountable. I think that's incredible. But also, you will see in almost every population in the world, there are always pockets of people who maybe don't feel like their voices are heard in the majority government. And so I think Black History Month is applicable to places where people are fighting for indigenous rights or fighting for, Afro-descendant rights in places like Peru or in other countries. And so, or even here in Colombia. And so I think that it's definitely applicable because in most places of the world, there is a majority culture and there's often minority cultures, even if that's in a religious context.
My work. Let me go back to the Deep South and you growing up in Tampa and your parents in Tennessee.
Yeah, you hit it.
How do you talk to your parents about Black History Month? Because you grew up you're the generation that you're the after generation of the of the civil rights. They probably grew up during the civil rights.
Right. So my mom can remember segregation, living in segregated society. And my dad will always tell me that there were some bad things about segregation, but then there were also some good things. For instance, there were very strong Black businesses during segregation because people had to patronize one another. The community and the village mentality. We have a proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. And so people used to really look out for each other. And I think some of that was lost during urbanization, the mass movement of people to urban centers.
To urban and northern cities.
Right, to northern cities, because there was just so many people living together at that point. But when I grew up in Tampa, I just had a very different life. I would say that in most of my education, my family was almost always the only Black family. So I think because of the reality I had growing up, always being the only Black person in honors classes or in gifted classes, my parents really, really pushed the idea of going to a historically Black university because they wanted me to form a sense of what it meant to be Black in America, to form a sense of identity, of self-love, and to also have a nurturing environment during those formative years of my development, of my self-development and professional development.
Okay. The last couple of years, something different. Last couple of years, I've noticed, and everybody has noticed, a lot of awareness on Blackness or more visible Blackness. For example, in movies, this coming weekend, the Oscars are coming, and movies. Even the book business. You said you're Audible. You're a reader. I know
reader.
You're a reader.
Love
so
it.
and oh my God!
Don't want to plug Audible, but
last couple of years, really, really good young writers, African American writers, got in the spotlight and developed. Is there are there more visible now? Has there been a change last couple of years on?
Yeah, I love to talk about that because I'm into art. So I think about African Americans having creative control of their product. Yeah. Because if you think about back in the day when people were coming up with these great blues songs or these great jazz songs, they were very creative. They, created improvisation, things like that in jazz, but they didn't have the control to not only make the music, write the music, produce the music, sell the music. Oftentimes they lost that control and lost many resources along the way. So many people died very impoverished. But now you see media giants who are African Americans producing content. Like, for instance, there's a very young guy named Ryan Coogler who came up with the Marvel movie Black Panther, and it's an international success. We also have Ava DuVernay, who's an African American woman who's made a reenactment of Selma, which was this bridge crossing, a civil rights movement in Alabama. And she also has like a show called Queen Sugar that she does with Oprah. Don't even have to say more about her. We even have an alumni from my university, Will Packer, who just came out with Girls Trip, which was like more of a comedy movie, but it ended up being a crossover, as we like to call it, like related to many different audiences. And he's done a lot of film. So I think what's happening is it's not just artists, it's not just musicians, it's not just writers, but African Americans in general. Because of the change in technology and mediums, being able to get to YouTube or being able to get to a way to produce your music. Even I think when Beyonce came out with a few albums ago, she like put her own album out and she already had all the videos made. And that's something that an artist couldn't do back in the day. So even though it's an evolution of Black thought, of Black content, it's also the change in society and the internet and just accessibility,
Perfect. Kindall, we end up every interview here at CCA Radio asking something completely different.
Okay, let's do it.
So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you're going to be completely honest about this.
Okay.
Kindall, what are you watching?
What am I watching? So I don't watch TV, like hardly ever, but one of the last things I watched was a series, speaking of like Black people producing great content, was a series called Underground. And it was about the Underground Railroad.
The Underground Railroad.
And it was so good. It was with a childhood actress who I grew up loving. She used to be on the show called Full House. And they had some great hip hop music like in the storyline. But it's this really wonderful story of just all the things that people had to endure through slavery and the courage they had to go back and get other people to freedom. So I loved Underground.
Underground. Good recommendation.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Yeah. Or the last great book that you have to say, this is my recommendation?
Okay. So I read and I listen to a lot of books because I'm constantly in transit because of Bogota traffic. I love you, Bogota, but you got to get your transit together. Come on. We need a metro. So, but in the meantime, I was just going to say that I am listening to a book. Well, no. I'll say what I'm reading with my eyes. So I'm currently reading with my eyes Investment for Dummies.
Okay.
Because I want to learn how to be great with my personal finances, because I recognize serving overseas being a diplomat is such a privilege. And I want to make sure that I do the right things now in my life to be a good steward so that future generations will have choices and will have options. And so, yes, I'm learning about personal finance.
Okay. That's like being an adult.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a grown-up. Trying.
What are you listening to? What's on your playlist? That playlist that's recurrent. You go back to it.
I know, I'm sorry, but I'm actually, I have to say that I'm listening to a book.
Okay.
But I'll do half and half. So I am listening to a book called The Warmth of Other Suns, which is about the Great Migration. Fantastic book. I thought it was just going to be about the movement of people, but it's really about all these atrocities that were happening in the South during like the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and it's awesome. But other things I'm listening to, in terms of music, I like old music. Like, my dad grew me up on things like Donny Hathaway. People don't even know about him. Stevie Wonder. They're like old type songs, and they feed my soul. Yeah. But when I do think about what I'm listening to, I have something for you. So I don't know if you know this, but during Black History Month, we have a Black National Anthem. A lot of people don't know.
I know there's a theme every year that's picked on Black history. For example, this year, Black History Month, the theme was African Americans in times of war. That was the theme for 2019. But I didn't know about the anthem.
So there's an anthem. So I'm going to have to share a little bit of the anthem with you guys. Well, no, first let me just say the guy who wrote the anthem was a scholar. He ended up actually being a consul. He served as like an honorary consul in Venezuela, Nicaragua, but he was an African-American guy. His name is James Johnson. He has a middle name that's not coming to me now, but it's called Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I'll sing a little bit of it. How
Please
about that?
do.
Okay, so guys, it goes, lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. So that's Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's kind of connected to the church. I don't know, the history of the church, the sound of the church. And when you go to Black churches during Black History Month, people will be singing this song. So if you have an opportunity, check out Lift Every Voice and Sing. I think Beyonce sang it at Coachella, so people should be aware of it now. But it's a great song, great message, and it's something that I love as a part of my history.
KINDALL, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
I want to give a big shout out to Laura Cruz from the embassy, who gave us this opportunity to interview you through Black History Month. I thought it was going to be an interview with a diplomat. I never thought you were going to end up singing. Well, so that's a first.
Multifacetedness. That's
there you go. That's what you should be doing. Thank you so much. This has been really, really fun for everybody. Thank you for being here at CCI Radio, and hope to hear from you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.